Welcome to the BioPharma Business Intelligence Unit, where symbolic integrity meets strategic clarity. At BBIU, we go beyond the headlines to decode the structural forces behind global biopharma, AI, and economic realignment. If you value precision, verification, and symbolic depth, this channel is for you. Subscribe now to access our weekly briefings, dossiers, and intelligence reports, and consider joining our institutional tier to unlock early warning systems, custom metrics, and exclusive strategic insight. You're not just listening, you're entering the future of epistemic intelligence. www.biopharmabusinessintelligenceunit.com.
Avian influenza returns to Minnesota. Turkey industry caught between containment and vaccine hopes. Summary: Minnesota, the largest turkey-producing state in the United States, is once again facing highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI H5N1. After a 5-month respite, a commercial turkey farm in Redwood County confirmed infection, forcing the culling of nearly 20,000 birds and re-establishing a quarantine zone. Farmers who previously relied on enhanced biosecurity and technological tools such as laser deterrents now confront the limits of containment. Industry leaders are shifting toward vaccination as a medium-term solution. While vaccine development is ongoing, no formulation currently addresses the dominant 2.4.4b strain circulating in North America. The USDA has 4 licensed vaccines for poultry, none yet aligned with this variant. Producers now press Washington for acceleration of trials and deployment. The timeline remains uncertain, with 1 to 2 years cited optimistically. Structural findings: containment fragility. Laser deterrents and biosecurity mitigations slowed but did not prevent recurrence. Culling as default, nearly 20,000 birds destroyed, echoing past episodes of large-scale losses. Regulatory gap: 4 USDA licensed vaccines exist but do not match the prevailing 2.3.4b strain. Farmer mobilization: Turkey Growers Association leaders actively lobby in Washington, shifting from resistance to vaccine advocacy. Economic stakes: Minnesota's poultry ecosystem, growers, processors, feed suppliers, and logistics remains structurally exposed. Evidence data points: first detection in commercial poultry since April 2025 in Redwood County. 20,000 turkeys culled, a 6-mile quarantine zone imposed. Laser technology reportedly reduced wild bird interactions and prior infections by approximately 50%. USDA states 4 licensed vaccines exist, none for the current strain. University of Minnesota experts estimate vaccine licensure takes 2 to 3 years, potentially shortened under emergency authorization. BBIU opinion: avian influenza in Minnesota is not an isolated event, but part of a global cycle, exposing the fragility of the poultry trade. The culling plus biosecurity model has reached its limit. Vaccination is the only sustainable path, yet timelines are slow and coordination weak. Each outbreak embeds costs into the system. Producers pass losses into future sales, importers pay premiums, and poultry prices rise. Poultry, once the cheapest and most stable animal protein, is now volatile, carrying a permanent influenza surcharge. For food import-dependent countries, this volatility is a direct threat to affordability and stability. Rising poultry prices spill into inflation and political tension. Without faster adoption of vaccines and broader diversification of supply, global food security will remain hostage to the next outbreak. Annex: what is avian influenza? Avian influenza, or bird flu, is a viral disease primarily affecting birds, caused by influenza type A viruses. These are classified by 2 surface proteins, hemagglutinin H and neuraminidase N, producing subtypes like H5N1 or H7N9. Wild birds, especially migratory ducks and geese, often carry the virus without illness. The risk emerges when the virus infects domestic poultry, causing devastating outbreaks. Some forms are low pathogenic, while highly pathogenic strains can kill entire flocks rapidly. Transmission occurs via feces, saliva, or secretions from infected birds. Migratory patterns contribute to global spread. In commercial farms, the virus spreads quickly due to animal density. Human infections are rare, usually after close contact with infected birds, but can be severe with high mortality. Avian influenza has massive economic impacts. The main response is culling entire flocks, which causes significant losses and disrupts exports. The dominant strain today, H5N1 clade 2.3.4.4b, has affected not only poultry, but also wild birds, mammals, and even dairy cattle in the U.S. Actions when HPAI is detected: Upon confirmation, immediate quarantine is imposed. All movement is restricted, and nearby farms are monitored. Infected flocks are culled, and carcasses are safely disposed of. Farms are then cleaned and left fallow for 30 to 90 days before restocking. Trade restrictions are applied, and international partners are notified. Wild bird surveillance is increased. Vaccination is used in some countries, but the U.S. currently follows a policy of quarantine, depopulation, and monitoring, methods effective but economically burdensome. Economic impact. The economic toll of avian influenza goes far beyond the loss of infected birds. When an outbreak is confirmed, entire flocks must be culled. In the most recent case in Minnesota, nearly 20,000 turkeys were destroyed, but in past years the numbers have reached into the millions across the United States. Each culling represents not only the loss of animals, but also the wasted feed, labor, and months of production. Farmers then face a 30 to 90-day fallow period during which no revenue is generated. Although the USDA provides compensation, payments rarely cover the full loss. Producers must still repopulate barns, upgrade biosecurity, and sustain operations without income. The costs ripple outward to processors, feed suppliers, and local economies. At the market level, avian influenza causes volatility. Supply reductions push up prices, while export bans cut off foreign markets. Even though cooked poultry is safe, recurring headlines erode consumer confidence. Losses can be staggering. Minnesota produces over 40 million turkeys a year, nearly 1/5 of the U.S. total. A major outbreak can destabilize the entire regional economy. The 2015 outbreak cost $3.3 billion nationally, and since 2022, cumulative losses have already surpassed that. Without an effective vaccine program, Minnesota's turkey industry remains trapped in a destructive cycle that undermines both local resilience and national food security. Leading global exporters of chicken meat. Today, Brazil is the world's leading exporter of chicken meat, shipping almost 5 million tons annually to more than 150 countries. The United States follows with about 3.3 to 3.5 million tons, largely to Mexico, China, and other regional partners. The European Union, led by Poland, ranks third with close to 1.8 million tons, while Thailand specializes in processed chicken exports of about 1 million tons, primarily to Japan and the EU. China, though the largest importer of chicken globally, also exports around 0.4 to 0.5 million tons of processed products. In structural terms, Brazil dominates the global supply chain. The U.S. relies heavily on domestic consumption. Poland is the rising power inside Europe. Thailand has carved out a niche in processed poultry, and China plays a dual role as both exporter and the biggest buyer on the world market. Recent avian influenza reports in major exporting countries. In Brazil, the world's largest poultry exporter, the Ministry of Agriculture confirmed its first outbreak of highly pathogenic avian influenza in a commercial flock on May 15, 2025, in Rio Grande do Sul. The virus killed more than 7,000 breeder birds, and the remainder of the flock was culled. After strict disinfection and a 28-day observation period with no new cases, Brazil declared itself free of commercial avian influenza again, allowing poultry exports to resume. The United States continues to report sporadic detections across multiple fronts. Wild birds remain a reservoir, while commercial poultry farms face recurring risks. Since 2024, the virus has also spread into dairy cattle herds, and isolated human cases have been confirmed among farm workers with close contact. As of September 2025, U.S. authorities, including the CDC and USDA, still describe avian influenza as widespread in wild birds and a persistent threat to domestic livestock. In the European Union, particularly in Poland and the Netherlands, the bloc's largest exporters, no major commercial outbreaks have been confirmed in the last 3 months. However, surveillance remains high, especially during the migratory bird season. The European Food Safety Authority, or EFSA, continues to monitor wild bird populations, warning that Europe's dense poultry sector remains structurally exposed. Thailand, a leading exporter of processed poultry, has not reported major outbreaks in recent months. Nevertheless, authorities remain on alert after Cambodia, its neighbor, confirmed new H5N1 cases earlier this year. Thailand's position as a regional hub for poultry exports depends heavily on keeping its farms disease-free. and any spillover from neighboring countries would pose a significant risk to its trade. Taken together, these updates show that avian influenza continues to pressure even the most important poultry exporters. Brazil managed to contain and recover quickly. The U.S. is grappling with a broader, multi-species challenge. Europe is maintaining vigilance, and Thailand remains cautious at its borders. The pattern highlights how global poultry trade is never far from disruption, with each outbreak carrying consequences for both food security and international markets. Global supply chain and price impact of avian influenza. Before outbreaks, the global poultry market is relatively stable and cost-efficient. Average export prices for frozen whole chicken from Brazil, the world's largest supplier, hover around $1,200 to $1,300 per metric ton, while U.S. broiler exports typically range between $1,400 and $1,500 per ton. Supply chains flow smoothly, with Brazil and the United States anchoring trade, the European Union, led by Poland, supporting regional demand, and Thailand exporting high-value processed products to Asia and Europe. Once an outbreak occurs, this balance is quickly disrupted. In producing countries, immediate culling removes millions of birds, and import partners often suspend purchases. The U.S. outbreak of 2015, which destroyed over 50 million birds, drove poultry prices up by 15 to 20% in 2 months, lifting Brazilian export prices above $1,600 per ton. Brazil's May 2025 outbreak triggered a temporary shock, shifting demand to the U.S. and Thailand, pushing spot prices to $1,700 per ton. Domestically, prices may dip due to trapped surplus stock, but globally, importer competition drives prices up. After the 2022-2023 HPAI wave, average world broiler prices hit $1,800 to $1,900 per ton, the highest in over a decade. After containment, trade slowly resumes, but prices rarely return to previous levels. Producers factor in prior losses, culling, disinfection, revenue gaps into future prices. By late 2025, global poultry prices are projected at $1,500 to $1,600 per ton, 15 to 20% higher than the pre-2022 baseline. Each new outbreak embeds avian influenza as a hidden surcharge in the international poultry trade. Impact on food import-dependent countries. For nations heavily reliant on imported poultry, avian influenza outbreaks abroad translate almost immediately into domestic food security pressures. Countries in the Middle East, North Africa, and parts of Asia often source more than half of their chicken supply from exporters like Brazil, the United States, or the European Union. When those suppliers face outbreaks, the consequences cascade. Price inflation is the first impact. Importers with limited domestic production capacity must compete for reduced global supply. When Brazil temporarily lost export certification in May 2025, wholesale chicken prices in the Gulf states and North Africa rose by 10 to 15% in under a month. For low-income households, this strains budgets and increases inflation on basic food baskets. Supply disruption is the second effect. Import bans create sudden shortages. Cold storage runs low, retailers ration volumes, and governments release strategic reserves. In island economies and food deficit states, this can lead to outright scarcity. Strategic vulnerability is the third dimension. Over-reliance on a single exporter, like Brazil, heightens risk. Countries such as Saudi Arabia, South Africa, and the Philippines are particularly exposed. Diversification to suppliers like the U.S., Thailand, or Ukraine is costly. Lastly, political and social repercussions emerge. Rising chicken prices are visible to consumers and can lead to public discontent, policy actions, and emergency subsidies. The political cost of avian influenza extends far beyond farms into the streets of cities like Cairo, Lagos, and Manila.